to do.
You're not going to pay me anymore when I show up and do extra work, and you're not going to give me opportunities or help support the needs that I've expressed, then why would I do anything beyond what's expected of my role?
Speak to the type of person that would absolutely love to be here with every ounce of their soul.
No more excuses. No more branding band-aids. The art of positioning. Let's freaking go. You can write the perfect positioning statement, put it on the wall, put it in the deck, but if the way that your business runs doesn't fit how your people think, well, none of it holds. Today, we're getting into what happens when neurodivergent minds meet businesses that were never built with them in mind, and what building it right actually requires. So we have on two badass guests, as usual, to talk to different aspects of this. And one of them is Alexis Frank, who's run for public office at 26 and has a framework called Governance by Design that treats how people are wired as hiring advantage instead of something to manage around. But hang on. Exactly how far did you get with this public office running? Like what?
Oh gosh, just to the primary. So I lost in my primary to someone who really enjoyed talking about taxes, and then he lost in the general because I told him he needed to stop talking about taxes in order to like actually meet people where they are. And I said, if you don't stop talking about taxes, you're going to lose. And he said, okay. And then he kept talking about taxes, and he lost. So he probably should just listen to me.
Are you going to try again? Like, is this a...
No, actually, I realized pretty quickly that's not my calling. The nature of the work I do, a lot of people seem to think that I should be the face of their movement, but that's not what I do. I lead the leaders of the movement. My job is to make sure that the people who are guiding you are in touch with themselves and that the systems and the governance that they've created works for everyone. So it's not my job to be the face of someone that fights for your particular movement, because there's a million of them all across the planet. It's my job to make sure that you are rooted in the movement that you're creating and that the movement you're creating is sustainable for a really long time. So no, public office is not in the works ever again.
I mean, it kind of, like I'm seeing traces of it. So maybe it's like somewhat interconnected, but we've also got on Mark Soanes in the house, who spent over a decade leading teams before he even knew that he was ADHD. Has 2 master degrees, a doctorate, and now he runs both a consulting firm and a neurodiversity nonprofit. But there's 2 rescue pugs at home, apparently, that run him. So have they just fully out-strategized you? Like what?
They are just the little bosses of our household running us around. But it's interesting. They'll be 0 to 60 for about 20 minutes, and then they'll go nap for 6 hours. So they give us a nice long period of time where we can get some stuff done. But yeah, they keep us on our toes for sure.
You don't even need like a doctorate or master's for this. Like, it calls into question all of our teachings here.
Absolutely. I feel way overqualified for taking care of 2 pugs most days, but I think they appreciate it.
Love it. All right. Well, let's dig in. Most businesses I've seen build their processes around one kind of brain without ever deciding to. Usually it's the owner's hex. Like, it's how I've approached it before. But where does it usually go wrong in each of your experiences?
I think here it's that assumption that just because we've always done it this way, that's the way we should keep doing it. And it's that lack of awareness that other people's brains actually work different than our own. And so we see founders and leaders and managers who just are like, well, this is what worked for me, and so we're going to keep doing it in the way that worked for me. And it often takes something significant to jar them out of that and to help them realize, hey, 20 odd percent of the population is neurodivergent in some way. And we all have different experiences, different ways of working, different ways of thinking. And maybe we need to reevaluate some of the ways that we operate in the workplace to be more supportive of those different ways of thinking and working.
And in addition to, well, it worked for someone else or it worked for me, we also get, I don't know, we also get the pressure of this is the way it's always been done. And we pretend to be powerless in how we create, right? So it's like, oh, well, I'm just a mid-level manager, so I don't really have any power here to change anything. And there's a little twinge of laziness or dissonance that comes with, well, it's kind of always been this way, as an excuse to not actively do the work to change things. And there's a combination of it's always been this way and it's worked for me, so why can't you just get in line kind of thing. That's where you find that people are building a little bit lazily, and you're going to find that those businesses in the near future, the next, I would say 5 to 10 years, are going to be the ones that begin to collapse under the pressure of millennials and Gen Z who are like, well, I'll just go find somebody else who will respect me and support me. And our generation, the generation behind us, is calling a bluff for a lot of these businesses. Like, you don't have the power over me that you think you do. And if you don't accommodate me, I'll just go find someone who will.
I see that a lot, where it's like, oh, hey, like, almost direct to the point in terms of, oh, I'm going to take some like leave. I'm going to take some time for myself. It's like very on point, like very direct compared to before, where it's like, oh, hey, like maybe I'll take some leave later on for myself. It's showing up a lot faster. But where do you guys think it shows up first? Like the first hints of it, is it like the hiring, how meetings are run, how the work gets assigned, or somewhere else?
I think we see it often when your best employees start or stop maybe showing up quite the way they used to. And when you start seeing those top performers and those people that used to be on the ball, focused, energetic, trying to drive real change, drive real improvement, kind of start not saying as much in meetings and taking a step back and not putting in those extra hours, that's your first hint that something's truly wrong.
So it's similar in the way that you would see, like, normally people are just generally unhappy with their work. There isn't any other areas that you see. It's like, okay, well, I want to take more leave, or I'm feeling sick more often, like that sort of, those hints.
Yeah, quiet quitting. Like, all of a sudden, I'm just not interested anymore. I went really above and beyond in my last job before I quit. You know, I worked for a government contractor, and I was very valued on my team until I wasn't. And then I was like, you don't listen. And I would try to tell people, 6 months ahead of time, if we don't deal with this now, you're going to be freaking out in December. And I'm tired of doing this every December with you guys. I don't want to do this anymore. And I would tell them, and I would tell them, and I would tell them. And every December they would roll up in the same place. And I'm like, I told you guys about this 6 months ago, and you're not listening. And when my very job is to forecast what's going to happen, also having a neurodivergent brain, putting patterns together, I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen if you don't do A, B, and C, and you don't want to listen, and then you want to make your lack of planning my emergency, I'm not doing that anymore. And I even had to tell my boss, listen, you're putting me in this meeting with this guy who all he does is panic, like his job is on the line. And I was like, and you don't pay me enough to deal with him. Stop letting him into my meetings, or remove me from them. And he stopped letting him into my meetings because at that point, he recognized my value. But the communication aspect of it is very, very important. This passive communication of quiet quitting and just slowly curling back in, you're going to see a lot of that go away. And people are going to become a lot more upfront, the way that I was at my job. Like, if you don't change, I will leave. You've got 3 strikes and then I'm out. What are you going to do about it?
I think a lot of that depends on how many options people feel like they have. When we see hundreds of thousands of tech workers who are struggling to find work because of the volume of layoffs we've gone through. I think a lot of people feel like they maybe can't rock the boat in those ways. And certainly it's great when you have an employee who is able to flag those issues as vocally as you have, Alexis. That's fantastic. And I'm glad your leaders paid attention to that. But I think we're also seeing a lot of folks that are burnt out but feel trapped.
So then it just becomes like they're not really completing their job fully. They're there, they're existing, but they're like, I'm done, I'm burnt out. Like, I will come in and do the bare minimum. That's what you're saying there?
Yeah, it may be the bare minimum, or it may just be no longer going above and beyond. Often when we talk about the bare minimum, that's what you're paid to be there to do. Like, you're not going to pay me anymore when I show up and do extra work, and you're not going to give me opportunities or help support the needs that I've expressed. Then why would I do anything beyond what's expected of my role?
When you're trying to implement something across the entire business, where, say, for example, you want everybody to be going forward with like the same direction and that same role, that's going to show there as well from what you guys are describing. It's like, hey, we want to get that feedback from, say, for example, the customers, but the people who are dealing with the customers, maybe they're facing that burnout. Maybe they're facing that like complete disconnect from that attention. So they're like, well, why should we give this feedback that maybe these customers are saying, this aspect of the service or this aspect of the product is not quite working. So in your opinion, what's the difference between a business that's aware of neurodiversity and one that's actually built around it?
I mean, I would say that businesses in general should be built around their people when it starts with hiring practices. What I do with a lot of my clients is, okay, don't just put an arbitrary list of things you want this person to do. Speak to the type of person that would absolutely love to be here with every ounce of their soul. And that's how you speak to a neurodivergent brain, because if we're bored, we're leaving, right? We're not here, we're not paying attention. So how do you conjure the feeling of, this was meant for me, I feel like I'm drawn to be here? And then when you get this person in the role, then it's, okay, how do you feel working here? Hey, it seems like you're doing really great. Would you like some other responsibility? What aspects of your job that we put in here doesn't feel right for you? Taking the time to actually know your people and to care about what they have to say, instead of sticking them in the box of, well, this is what you were hired to do, and making it seem like that made up role that you created has to stay that exact way forever. You are allowed to say, hey, listen, we love this person. And I've done this in a couple of the other companies that I've worked with. It's like, we hired you and you're great, but this role does not work for you. Let's put you somewhere else because you're still valuable and needed here, but just not where we thought that you belong. And that's okay, because we still appreciate you. And we're still going to put you somewhere where we know that you will enjoy being and that we will still get the value out of. You have to understand that these are individuals inside of shared systems, and that at the end of the day, you are a shared system as a business that individual does not have to contribute to if they don't want to. So treat them like you want them there. Treat them like the human that they are, and they will give everything to you.
Great answer. I have a couple of things I'd love to add, but Alexis, I totally agree with everything you just said. I think in my mind, it starts with instituting flexibility and training. Too often we see neurodiversity initiatives that stop at awareness. It's like, okay, well, we know we have neurodivergent individuals in our organization. Great. We know they may have different needs. Great. Now what? And it's training for managers. It's rethinking each part of those shared systems and how they interact. Who do we decide to promote into managerial roles? Are these people who are focused on continuing to do what they did as an individual contributor, but also tell people under them what to do? Or are these people who are focused on the well-being and the health of their team, the growth of their individuals that they are responsible for. So it's values for who you put into management. Then it's how do we think about performance reviews and promotions? How are we thinking about who we reward and what we reward? Are we rewarding social interactions and who's the most liked, or are we rewarding the outcomes that people are driving? And then it's flexibility in how people work. It's if you need accommodations at work, or is it a whole big involved complicated process with HR that requires disclosure and long wait times, or is it, hey, we've got the most requested supports for individuals with disabilities or who need accommodations available on demand. You don't need to disclose, just go and get that ergonomic keyboard, or go and get those headphones or that screen protector, or choose a different desk. We have those flexibility pieces integrated into the system where anybody who needs them can take them. And we recognize that we're supporting employees in that way. So in my mind, it's all of these interconnected elements around managers and how we actually manage the employee life cycle and how we think about accommodations and so much more. But that's a great starting place for most organizations.
It sounds like you're both, very much like me in that you step away from that surface level work side of things. And I think as owners, a lot of the time we focus on things that are what others can see or what we can see. And I mean, from what I can see, Alexis, you place focus on that. The good leadership infrastructure is important. And Mark, like from your side, like you focus on rebuilding those processes based on procedural justice. Like it's all to influence that, going from awareness to like, hey, what does it actually look like in play? And can you both like explain a little bit like, okay, shifting from just that surface level to what does this look like in play? Can you explain some of the steps?
Happy to share a little bit here. I think we see this distinction, or I've seen this distinction between leaders who are focused on the outcomes in terms of numbers. Are we driving revenue? Are we driving profit? Are we making the shareholders happy? And leaders who are really focused on what are all the inputs that actually build and sustain a great business. And employee well-being is a huge part of that. And we've seen case study after case study, example after example of that over the last few decades of organizations that shifted their mindset in let's foster employee well-being and support our employees and make sure they have the tools and resources they need and the support they need from management and the vision from leadership. And they explode as a company. It just goes so well. It's amazing. And nobody was talking about revenue. Nobody was talking about profit. It was all focused on let's create a great place for people to do their best work. And so I come back to that as like, what's your mentality as a person in one of these leadership roles? And if you're focused on the wrong thing, how do we shift that as a starting point to make sure that you're actually thinking about the pieces that matter? Because it's easy to get distracted and focus on driving more revenue, right? Like we all can empathize with that. We all understand why that is a temptation, but their job as a leader is to focus on what actually matters, which is all of the different pieces that come together to drive revenue.
Yeah, I agree. The details of focusing on the pieces that matter, right? It's like there have been so many people who are like, oh yeah, we focus on employee well-being. Yeah, employee well-being is not foosball tables and pizza parties. Nobody wants another freaking pen or koozie or, I don't know, t-shirt. That's not employee well-being. Employee well-being is listening. First and foremost, when you ask, don't send out these arbitrary surveys of how are we doing? And then half the company is saying, we would prefer, something else. And then you're like, oh, well, 50% of the people are happy here. And then we're moving on. It's listening. It's actually doing what you said you were going to do. It's saying not just what kind of environment do I want to have here, but how am I also considering the people that already are here because I like them and I enjoy them and I want them to stay. So how do I accommodate them? And if there's something for me as the owner or as the team of managers, if there's something in us that feels triggering to us, like why is it so hard for us to accommodate people? Like why do we feel like what people are asking for is too much that we'll just fire them and try to get somebody else who'll just get in line? Like people who run these organizations have to have the ability to self-reflect and not just assume that because they've built a multi-million-dollar conglomerate that they're always right or that people will just automatically stay. They have to have the ability to self-reflect first and say, I want to improve, but why? And I've tried to improve before and it didn't seem to work. Why? What do I need to do first before I try to tackle all of the other details that go into keeping this place afloat?
Absolutely, Alexis, I love that. It makes me think of one of my litmus tests, which is like if you're a leader and you're not uncomfortable, you're probably doing it wrong. Right? That discomfort you feel at being focused on something other than yourself in a way that actually matters is a great indicator that you're focused on something that does matter. So yeah, I think about discomfort as one of those elements that's really critical for managers and leaders, because getting outside of their comfort zone and actually taking a time to listen to what might be going wrong and think critically about how do we fix this in a way that is sustainable and not just shutting out the naysayers, that's huge.
I think there's a connection between what you guys are saying where, okay, yes, we do need to self-reflect, but sometimes we're too much inside of that bottle to see it ourselves. And Mark, what you were saying before, like to get that, to get the feedback from the team and to build the kind of relationships where you're able to get that feedback from everybody. So like the quiet ones, the neurodiverse ones. Any tips so that that they can actually improve rather than being like, okay, what am I doing wrong? What am I missing?
You hire people like us. I mean, we're not, that's exactly why we exist, right? Well, at least that's why I exist. I won't speak for Mark, but it's like, I have an uncanny ability to go inside of an organization and immediately see what the struggle is. You are there every day. You want to believe that everything is going the way that you believe it's going, and you're too close to it. So that's the very point of having a set of outside eyes and perspective to come in and say, all right, so I spent a week here. Or for me, it's like, all right, well, I've been here 5 minutes and I spoke to one person. I've already written down 10 different things. So we can start with that. And then I quote you for the rest. But it's like, that's literally why you hire people who aren't in there with you all the time. So that way they can say, and honestly, that is also why you hire neurodiverse people, because we're simply going to catch the patterns and the feelings of things that you might have become immune to. The same way you can't smell your house until after you come back from vacation for like a week. You can't sniff what's going on in your business. You need somebody else who hasn't been in there before to come through and feel it out and see what's going on and tell you, hey, this is what we can do and how we can fix it. That's the easiest way anyway. You can try to do it by yourself, but how well is that really working for you?
Well, I was going to poke back, being like, well, okay, what about those that you've already got that neurodiverse person in there already? What are the kind of questions that you can ask, or how can you create that environment so that they're able to give that feedback before, outsourcing?
That's a great question too. And it comes back to what policies or what infrastructure do you have in place that allows people to feel safe to talk to you? Because you can change a policy overnight and be like, okay, we're open door. And people are going to be like, are you? Because you haven't really been that way in the past. And I pitched to another government contractor about doing one of my workshops with them. And the only reason why I've been able to get so close is because the guy that I've been talking to, he's like, I've been trying to tell them these things that you're trying to give us for years, and they don't listen to me. And he's like, and I think that if I bring you in here and you say the same exact things that I've been saying, maybe then they'll finally listen. There are so many people who are already in your organization that can sniff the rat that you've been trying to hide under the rug, but you're not listening because you didn't hire them to say those things. You got so stuck in what that person was supposed to be doing in the job you hired them to do that you forgot that they're completely capable of thinking outside of the box that you tried to place them in. And so it comes back to, all right, I don't necessarily want to hire a consultant to come in and do all these things for me. So first, as the owner or as the manager, I need to self-reflect and say, how do I create an actual opening environment for the people who already work here to feel safe to bring this to us? What will we do to safeguard them to make sure that their feedback actually goes and is listened to? And how do we ensure the continuity of their safety moving forward so that it remains this open way of being? If you don't want to hire somebody, you got to self-reflect. You want to hire somebody, you got to self-reflect. Either way, you got to self-reflect and ask yourself what you really want.
Ego and comfort are the two biggest enemies in this space. There's this concept called learning agility, which is all about being open to new ideas, being eager to take new information that comes to you and learn how to incorporate it into your mindset and your way of viewing things. And it's the number one indicator of being a great leader. And so when I talk to folks, I'm like, that curiosity, that learning agility, that desire, that eagerness to learn where you're wrong is the number one ally you can have, maybe apart from a consultant who's going to come in and do it for you, right? But that long-term success factor for you as a leader, it's show me how I'm wrong, right? Help me understand where I can do better. And that attitude will let you receive that input when somebody shares it. And when you live that attitude day in and day out, people learn that you are a safe person to share feedback with.
That gaps area, like I've seen a lot of business owners struggle to see like their own gaps. And fair, I mean, like Alexis, you said it, Mark, you said it, like we're standing too darn close to it. And we've built a brand health audit exactly for that, to spot the gaps in how your brand is showing up within 5 minutes. You can catch that at badassery.com/brand-health-audit, or catch that link in the show notes. Now, I think a lot of what you guys mentioned there, and Mark especially, like it really leans into how you approach hiring. And I feel like most processes are antiquated. Hell, like how much are resumes relied on is such a big one to me, where that's a whole nother topic. But it seems like much of this like hiring process is focused on task orientated instead of brain orientated. What do you think? I mean, should that change? Like, how should it change, etc.?
I think traditional open form interviews are one of the worst ways to hire people. And there's been numerous studies that show exactly that. It's worse than flipping a coin. And so if you're looking to bring in the right people to your organization, I think there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but skills-based hiring is one of the best frameworks. And so looking for ways that you can evaluate a skill set rather than a culture fit is transformative. And too many neurodivergent individuals are weeded out of the process because they don't fit that traditional mold, that normate idea of how somebody's going to show up in an interview. And so if you haven't trained your managers to overcome kind of the biases they might have, if you haven't established appropriate processes throughout the hiring process of like, here are the questions you ask, here's how we evaluate them, or here's how we evaluate specific skills along the way, you're going to be weeding out those candidates inadvertently and in often ways discriminatory approaches that's harmful. Couple examples that I've seen over the years that I've spent. One company I worked for, they did traditional interviews, which was fine, or they had every candidate also write a paper. And if they passed either test, they got hired. And so different ways of expressing who you are and how you think really mattered for that role. That doesn't work for every sort of situation, but that's one way to approach it for certain types of roles. Microsoft famously has instituted a dedicated hiring program for autistic individuals that relies heavily on kind of an interactive Lego session to show how they think about building things before they go and step into a role as a software developer. So there's really creative approaches out there, but at the fundamental level, it's all about evaluating skills rather than how one performs in a social setting.
I mean, this is where I get a little bit, I guess the people who don't buy into it call it woo-woo, or a little bit esoteric. But with the last company that I worked with, we did, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with human design, but the point of my workshop, the Art of Going Inward workshop, is to sit with everybody that is in the company or on that team. And we go over their human design data and we say, hey, listen, you are this type of person. And it usually fits really well for them. They're like, oh my God, how do you know me so well? This is weird. All I gave you was like my birthday. And then we reorganize the team around what those people are actually really designed to do, not the type of performance that they've put on in order to be accepted by their company. And then when we find a gap where somebody needs to be hired, then we sit down and say, what kind of person do we want in this role? I want somebody who absolutely loves multitasking. Like it's something that they get a high off of, but also they can't help themselves. They really love to have like their hand in 4 different pots at the same time. Okay, then we're probably going to want a manifesting generator in this role, someone that can really switch throughout. So we're going to write the job description saying like, you absolutely love starting a project and then coming back to it later and starting a new one over here and coming back to it later. Or we want somebody in this role who can detect a pattern before anybody else can see it. We don't necessarily want to rely on them to work and beat the pavement 40 hours a week, but we know that the second we put them in here, they're going to be like, we can adjust this and this is where we can get more revenue there. Okay, you're probably going to want a projector in that role. And so we took this way of being like, oh, well, we don't just want a person who can do this job. We want a type of soul in the work that will be sustainable. And when we hired that way, that person immediately came in and felt like they were at home in the company. They immediately felt like this role was designed for them because it was. So it's also about being a little bit, what's the word that I'm looking for? You're preparing. You're saying, well, we don't just need somebody to fill this role really quick. No. All right, let's sit down. Let's have a conversation about who we want here. What kind of person do we want here? We take our time with the process to make sure that we're not getting a person in here who's just performing for an interview because they're desperate for a job. This is something that they desire for themselves. They want for themselves. They love to have and be, and they eat, breathe, and they enjoy it so much. It doesn't feel like we're begging them to be here to do the bare minimum. And it starts with kind of taking a step back and planning and taking your time and saying what kind of person would feel good in this role.
Has me thinking a bit around like, okay, walk and talk kind of interviews, like having that complete different perspective of like, or approach rather, as what that looks like, you know, something instead of sitting down at that table, seeing what makes sense, like, you know, say, for example, asking, hey, how do you process information? Are you like you visual learner, are you like text learner, etc., and integrating that into what that interview process looks like. At least that's the way that I'm thinking of it. But for each of you, say, for example, you want to, like, you know, how would you approach writing up a role and then running an interview based on around how someone thinks and around matching that to the business?
Alexis, you want to go first?
I would say this is where AI comes into play a lot, to make the process easier for you, right? So if you're like, hey, I want to speak to this type of person when I'm creating, the language for this role. Now, let's design a really unique interview process for how this specific type of person, we want them to move in the role. Because if you want to hire two different types of people, you need two different types of processes for them. I'm not, from an esoteric standpoint, a human design standpoint, I'm not going to ask a projector to run the same type of interview as I'm going to ask a manifesting generator to, because I need two different things from those people. So this is what we wrote the role for. What's the best way to interview this person to get them in a space where they feel comfortable and they're not performing? Because either way, you're still going to get people who have been traumatized from all their other interviews. You're still going to get people in here who are trying their best to dance around, for you and do the best, robotics moves to get you to hire them. So how do I immediately foster an environment that when they walk in here, they feel safe to be themselves? And that's going to look different for every person who comes in here. So it's also okay to say, hey, these are the people that we are looking at. These are the resumes that we submitted. This is what they said they're good at. Design me an interview process for each of these 5 people. So that way I can cater the interview to them. So that way they feel at home and they feel here. And a lot of people are going to say, well, that takes time and that takes resources. Yeah, but it costs less than turnover. It costs less than trying to find 10 other people to replace that person when they decide to leave in 3 months, because your people are worth the time and the effort and the energy. So narrow it down to your 5, create a bespoke interview process for them, use your resources the way you were designed to, and then watch that person stay for years. It's not hard. Nobody just wants to do it that way, or they don't believe that they have the bandwidth to do it that way, or that they're allowed to do it that way.
I think I take a different approach. I say we start out by focusing on what are the outcomes that this role needs to drive. And that's often something the manager themselves might not know. You might need to talk to the other people on the team and say, where are our gaps, right? Where do we need help? What are we struggling to deliver as a team? And where do we need assistance in making those things happen? And you get really clear, very crisp about what those outcomes are. And then we say, there's a lot of different ways somebody could drive these outcomes. They don't need to look just like the way the manager would do it or the way our star performer would do it. Let's be open that there's lots of ways of accomplishing this. And they don't need the same backgrounds that we have. They don't need to have gone to the same schools or necessarily have gotten the same degrees or anything like that. So let's think about, how do we evaluate candidates who are coming in and saying, if you were going to drive these outcomes, what would you do? How would you do that? And see if we can come up with creative ways of assessing those specific processes and say, if you were going to drive this outcome, walk me through step by step what you would do, and then show me some examples of how you would do that if you have them, or do a little exercise or a work program where you're able to show that. I'm a huge advocate of paid projects for your core candidate group, and say, we're going to pay you to do 8 hours of work and show us how you would actually do this job day in, day out, or do a trial period if you can. And it's not a good option for everybody. So a lot of people are coming from another job and can't kind of take that time off of work or anything like that. But where it's possible, do those kind of interim trial periods and say, let's test this out. Let's give you a chance to show what you're able to do in this role. And so moving away from kind of the traditional interviews and more focusing on learning how is this individual actually proposed to accomplish these tasks, and then find that person who we go, wow, never thought of it doing that way, and you're exactly who we need, because you're gonna come in and revolutionize how we complete this output or accomplish this output.
It's a really interesting point. I mean, I think a big part of what influences what you just said there is how they think and how they approach the role. So say, for example, the other people on the team, or even that hiring manager, the manager that they're going to be working with, for them to understand how they think and how they approach the roles is going to be a big part, because later on, like, you're going to have that friction of like, well, no, they don't really understand me. And well, maybe a big part of that is not understanding their approach or understanding the way that they think and come to different answers or different approaches. Maybe some is like very very technical. Maybe some people look at words and it's like, this is a lot of words. I'm feeling like overwhelmed. How would you guys approach that early on, be it like in that interview? Is that something that you say, for example, even in the application, tell us about the way that you think. Give us like one sentence in your email or something like that about like how you think or how you approach problems, or would you leave that for when you're actually meeting them face to face?
There is a time and a place to have kind of knockout questions up front. I think too many individuals, at least that I talk to, become fearful that that's going to be discriminatory in some way. If you're not going to respond to it exactly the way the manager wants it to be responded to, then you're out of the process. And so there's a temptation there to become that cookie cutter candidate who thinks and acts and looks just like everybody else, to perform that in a way that you think the hiring manager might be expecting. And so I think there's some work that a company has to do there up front to help clarify and create that sense of safety for candidates, that they can show up and be their true selves. And it takes time to build that reputation. That is not an overnight task. That is a hard thing to do. And so that's where I would urge caution on those sorts of tell us about yourself up front. A lot of people aren't going to know how to respond to that, and they're going to try to just respond in the way they think the manager wants it responded to. Approaching the kind of hiring that I outlined before also just, it takes a mindset shift for managers, right? And we talk about the idea of a culture ad, and this is hard for people to move past their own ego, the way that they've always done it, the way they value their own skills, and go, we need somebody to step into this role who maybe thinks and acts very differently from how I act. Even though I'm the leader, I'm the manager, I'm the expert, I want somebody very different from myself. And that's going to make the whole team stronger. That's a bold statement for a lot of people, and it takes time to get to that mindset.
I'd agree. It's not an overnight thing. You can't just go from, especially if you're like a high profile company and you have been in the news or you've been in media for even anything remotely, seen as bad or wrong. That's difficult to overcome, I'd say. And I guess this is why only a certain type of people hire me. But what I say is, if you are trying to get people to view you differently so that they can feel safe with you, perhaps for 2 years, you stop taking yourself so seriously as a company. Have you tried gamifying your hiring process? Instead of tell me about yourself, what does your application look like that feels like a board game? What are you asking people? Do they identify with the chicken or the bear? And people are going to be like, I'm so confused by this. Or like, tell me the most hilarious thing that happened to you in the last 30 days. Like, but stop asking people what their strengths and weaknesses are, right? Meet them somewhere they're not expecting to be met, in a space where they're like, I don't know how to answer this, so I'm just going to answer it. And get to the bottom of the way that people like feel or act off the cuff. And then go from there and be like, well, these people just completely exited out because they thought it was a joke. Or these people, they went completely gung-ho with it and was like, if I could be a tree, I would be a tree. And it's like, okay, they wanted to play. They wanted to have fun. They either felt safe enough or burnt out enough to be like, well, screw it. What do I have to lose by answering it this way? Because everybody else is rejecting me, right? Like, you really want to turn things around for your company or things like that. Throw out all the rules for a minute. Who said you have to hire the way that other people hire? Who said the way you have to interview and check the way that other people do? Neurodivergent people, we love that weird shit. So hit me with some weird stuff, and I'll see if I like it. And if I don't, I don't. But you're not going to really lose people who aren't already burnt out from filling out applications a million times over, asking them what their strengths and weaknesses are. At least with this way, you kind of have an opportunity to maybe put the spark back into that person. to say, even if we don't hire them or even if they're not a good fit here, maybe even for 5 minutes, we made them feel like something good could come from all of this. And at the end of the day, when you center the individuals who work for you or who don't work for you or who just want to work with you, you will do so much more for the people who actually work for you. And you will do so much more for your company by simply putting processes in place that actually care about every individual who interacts with your brand and works for your brand.
That in itself is a great way to see how they actually think, how they approach things without being like, hey, how do you approach things? And, even giving that story and like a legit just being, hey, this is our voice, but like, you know what, we're sick of the usual kind of questions. They don't lead to a good match. They don't and you're also not sure what to expect with the business. So why not format those questions or format what that interview or the entire process looks like based on the values, based on the direction that you want to go in. And that sounds like an entire way to plan, just that hiring side. But another big area that I see there is the founders, the owners, where, most of them know that they shouldn't be the bottleneck. But, okay, they don't necessarily know that they are the bottleneck until something breaks when they step away. So what are the early signs that a founder is still the bottleneck and before it actually breaks something?
I like to ask what decisions anybody else can make without them needing to be consulted, right? Like get that upfront indicator, like, hey, if your sales director, your engineering director, or somebody else wants to do this, do they need to come and check with you first? That's a very easy question for most people to answer. No, I want to be consulted on that. I need to review that. Or no, I completely trust that leader to make that decision or that person to make that decision. And that's a great early way, quick way to check, are you the bottleneck in this system? In my mind, it comes back to ego. When we let go of our ego and we approach with curiosity, we're able to acknowledge somebody else has that expertise and they're able to make that decision that we don't need to control it. So that's a easy first way to check.
I actually did an entire YouTube video on this, on how most founders are not actually meant to be leaders. They're meant to be founders. And you had a really great idea, especially the tech ones. You had such a great tech idea. Oh my God, gonna change so many lives. But you don't work well with others. You don't do people very well. People don't actually want to follow you. They like your idea. They want to see it come to life, but you're not very people-y. And so sometimes, again, this requires a little bit of self-reflection. It's very much like, I like what I do and our company's growing, but what do our turnover rates look like? What do our employee satisfaction rates look like? When you go on Glassdoor and it's like 10% of people would recommend the CEO. Okay, let's talk about that for just a second, because there's data everywhere you turn, everywhere you look. There's not a single person who's not building their company without some form of data right now. And the data is telling you exactly what you need to know. And if people are like, I like being here until the boss comes out. I like doing stuff until the boss talks. Okay, so you had a great idea. Now you need to go stay over there in your corner and hire the people to do the things for you so that you don't lose great people because you don't know how to interact with them. And again, there's nothing wrong with you as a founder just wanting to focus on the tech things. Honestly, most people who are founders, that's why they, created their companies. It was, I have this great idea and I want to focus on it and that's where I want to be. And then came HR. And then came all these things that come with running a company that you're like, well, I didn't want to do any of that. I just wanted to focus on the product or things like that. Recognizing that about yourself being okay with it, not saying that there's anything wrong with you, saying, this is who I am, this is what I have created, but I have surrounded myself with people that will make sure that the human side of the company gets taken care of and looked after. That is okay, because there's nothing wrong with you. You just have to learn how to bring yourself or bring your company to a place where you have people that can handle the things that you don't want to do. But that's the entire point, is it not? You're not supposed to be an island. You're hiring people so that you can have help. You might as well be surrounded by people, one, that you like, and two, that can actually do the things that you're not actually good at. You don't want a bunch of people surrounded by you and everybody's good at the same thing and everybody sucks at the same thing. There's supposed to be balance there. So all of my answers tend to come back to like self-reflection, right? Well, where can I be better? Because everybody seems to like it here, but nobody seems to like me. Okay, that's fine. Cool. Let's make it so that nobody has to interact with me.
Let's say they know the science now. How about the handoff? Okay, like how about, when they're passing on these decisions to others in the team? It's great. Like, it's easy enough. Like, okay, you do this, you do that. Like, these are things that you need to be handling. Is this going to, as Mark said, like, is this going to break? Do you know what to do? Does this need to get signed off? Okay, but like, how do we do this in a way that ensures everybody is heard, to ensure that everybody has that say, including the quiet ones, including the neurodivergent ones, that everyone is taken into account?
I think so many people, and we live in capitalism, right? Everything is hurry, 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 time, 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 the market this, sales that, end of the year, quarter 2, quarter 4, blah, blah, blah. We have to meet all these goals and these deadlines. Calm down, okay? All of that is made up. You're putting that pressure on yourself. Slow down, okay? You want to spend less money hiring new people? Slow down and say, we are going to spend the next month talking to people, asking them how they feel, gathering the information. We're not just going to send out a form for you to fill out, right? We're going to cultivate a space of safety for our people to bring these things to us. We're going to host forums. We're going to talk to this subset of group people over here. We're going to bring this set of people in like this. We're going to really focus on people. Then we're going to take all that data and we're going to bring it together. And we're going to talk about, okay, this has been from our month and a half of research of really sitting with people. This has been the resounding noise that has come from it. Okay, now we know what we need to do. Now let's go back to those people and say, here are some of our proposed solutions. How would this feel? How would that feel? Slow down, because not every fix that you create needs to be implemented overnight, because you seem to think, well, we have a problem. The quicker we fix it, the quicker we get back to normal, the quicker our numbers go back up, the quicker. It's not always about being the fastest. It's about being sustainable. You want your company to outlive you or not? Slow down. Ask these people, get to know them. Stop treating them like numbers or percentages to fix on a scale so that your company looks good. Do you want it to just look good, or do you want it to actually feel good and people actually want to work there? Chill out, calm down. You don't have to have the highest numbers this year if it means that everybody's actually happy, and then you can have the highest numbers next year. It's not hard.
Alexis, you make me think of that famous adage about slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and how important taking your time and being thoughtful about how things are done, how important that is. I'm autistic, and so I tend to think in spreadsheets rather than focus groups. And so I think about artifacts in the program management tradition or project management tradition. We have this idea of a RACI, responsibilities, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And so that's a tool I've often used when we're thinking about who can make the decision. Well, let's build a RACI, right? Let's take the time to actually identify what are all the sorts of decisions that we need to make in this functional space or as a company, and who needs to be consulted, who actually is responsible for it, who's accountable for it, and make those decisions and put it in writing and make it available to everybody. So when you, as a newcomer, like, well, I have this problem. Who is responsible for making this decision? Just go look at the company RACI and get that sense. I also love, Alexis, that you're channeling, I don't know if you know this or not, you're channeling a little bit of Levinthal's principles for procedural justice and thinking about how do we have safeguards to go back and evaluate the decisions we've made? How do we have opportunities to revisit and improve things even after we've written them down? And that is so critical because we don't know what we don't know. We're going to discover something in 3 months. We may have gone through this whole big process of discovering and gathering all the information and made the decision, and then we learned something new. And so you need to have that process of being able to come back and fix it or change it or improve it without judgment, without recrimination, without, oh my goodness, we screwed up. No, you learn something new. When you know better, you do better.
It's a little bit out of sight over here, but I created these 5 commitments for the unprecedented leader. And one of them is a commitment to evolution and recognizing that not everything is stagnant. Most things aren't stagnant. And so when you create what I call governance infrastructure for your business, the infrastructure that we come back to, right? This is what we say, recognizing, okay, it's actually been 3 or 4 years since we wrote that. And this is the way that we've evolved since then. So let's update it. Recognizing that everything that you've built your company on is still a living document. And it's okay to change when you change with the times, because if you get stuck with what used to be or the way that you thought things were supposed to be, that is how you lose your customer. That is how you lose the people that want to work for you, because you're standing still and you're not evolving the way that the people who want to support you need you to evolve, in a sense. And so when it comes to leadership, you have to be committed to, okay, we said that we wanted it this way, but it's been about 5 years and that's not really working anymore. So let's have a little another sit down. Let's talk about the way that things are actually evolving so that we can keep up with things. You're not going to create sustainability if you're not evolving, because the only thing in life that's constant is change. And it's not a bad thing when you keep up with it and when you keep the people who work for you and the people who interact with your brand at the top of your mind.
We lost Beatrice.
Whoop. Uh-oh.
Well, Alexis, I definitely agree with you there. It makes me think of the kind of the learning agility concept I mentioned earlier, right? If you're not always open to changing the way you think about things, then yeah, you're gonna head down that path of stagnation.
Yeah. And another one of the commitments is commitment to diversity and committing to surrounding yourself with people that are different from you, and not just gender and race, but also in brain capacity. And it's like, you can't always think in a linear way. You need to be surrounded by people who also have nonlinear ways of thinking. And when you commit to surrounding yourself with people like that, then that is also how when you're committed to surrounding yourself with people like that, you have no choice but to evolve, because everybody is going to constantly be challenging each other to think a higher way and to not just remain in one place.
Mark, you mentioned something really interesting there around that RACI and making sure that that's actually put out there and published to the entire team. Because most of the time when I'm having conversations, be it business owners, etc., whether they hire a consultant or they work with someone from leadership, this isn't published across the team. The information isn't going out there, so nobody really knows what are those updates. And I think that links to like that whole idea of like, hey, where the difference between accommodating people one at a time and actually redesigning how that business runs so that it works for more kinds of minds from the start. So, I mean, what do you guys think? How does that redesign actually look like in practice? I mean, where do businesses start? Where do they give up too early? What else can we do outside of like publishing things, making sure that that communication is there.
I recognize we can't always share everything that's happening, and we may not always want to, right? There's such a thing as information overload, and certainly we're all dealing with more information than sometimes we can handle most days. But giving people that pathway where if they want to learn more, it's available is super critical. And so not just publishing something like a RACI, but helping explain why it was chosen that way. What was the logic and the reasoning behind it? Interesting study is that for a lot of autistic people, they won't follow a rule until they understand why that rule exists. They need to understand kind of the reasoning, the logic behind it, why it matters. And that's something everybody likes to know, right? We don't want to follow arbitrary instructions. We want to know that it actually matters and why it was chosen to be that way. And that doesn't mean we need to spend, day-long sessions and all hands walking through every last detail. You just have to make the information available. And so something like an internal wiki that's really well organized and designed, maybe you have a person who helps oversee that and keep things organized. And then as new hires come in, you teach them, right? This is where information is stored. This is how it's organized. Here's how to find the background, the details, the justifications. And if there's something missing, come ask us. Right? We have a commitment as a leadership team that when something's not clear, when it hasn't been documented and it's brought to our attention, that's on us. That's not the fault of the person who comes and asks that needs clarity. That's our fault for not making it more clear. And we make a commitment that we're going to remediate that. So again, I'm a huge fan of transparency, and I think it makes workplaces so much better when it's clear who is responsible for what, who is undertaking what, who makes which decisions, and everybody in the organization knows how to find that information out when they need to.
And Mark actually follows one of the commitments, because one of the commitments is commitment to transparency and communication. But we also have to be careful that sometimes when we believe we're being transparent, we are then introducing bureaucracy. Sometimes bureaucracy, for me, is a result of poor governance and poor communication. What things get buried in, well, we have this process for this, go look at it there. And then it becomes, well, okay, you wrote it here. Or like we have a wiki that's been updated, but then it's like, I'm new here and I don't understand what any of that means. Or there's so many acronyms that I have to learn for this particular role. Now I'm drowning in transparency because they've told me everything. And right, so that's where we're talking about like overloading and not having too much of that. And so it's not just, hey, these are the ways that we do things, or this is how we're communicating, or this is the transparency, but also this is how direct we're being when we're talking about it too, right? Because we lose a lot of time in niceties. We lose a lot of, oh, well, I want things to, or we say that we do things this way, but then we're dancing around the subject. Nobody's being clear. Nobody's being straightforward. Nobody's, really asking the important questions. And so sometimes we're trying to be transparent, but then we're throwing so much information at people that what's really important is getting buried. So it's about making sure that the information that's the most pertinent to every single person who needs it, there's tiers to information, right? It's available to everyone. But you don't really need to see that. Come ask me because I'll tell you about it, because it's not necessary for you to know day in and day out. But we're also not gatekeeping to the point where our people who work for us can't figure out what they need to know if they want to research it by themselves. And so for every company, that looks different. That's not going to work the same for every company, for every size of company. It's just not going to. So that's the importance of knowing your company, knowing your people, and saying, how will it work best for us and what we desire to have and what we want to have? And then that's where kind of having that third set of eyes comes in to be like, have you thought about doing it this way and operating it this way?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so someone coming in right now and they've learned all this, what is the one thing that they can go and rectify today, or what can they start right now in their business to make that pivot?
Um, my answer is always the same. Self-reflect. Okay. Ask, depends on the size of your team, right? If you've got a team of 5 to 10 people or even up to 50 people, you need to have, for lack of a better term, you have a coming to Jesus with yourself, right? What was my desire when I created this company? What was I seeking? What do I still desire for myself? Who am I? And how far off from those desires and what I wanted, how far off am I from that, what I have now? And what is making me unhappy about the way that I'm running my company or the way that my company is being run? What is making everybody else unhappy about the way things are being done? And what do I need in this moment to help me get to where I want to be? And I don't say get back to what I wanted, because it could change. It's get to where I want to go, not the direction that I'm heading. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be willing to sit with yourself about what you desire, how much of what you desire has been overrun by what other people said you should be doing, and recognizing that you are an individual who created a shared system that you want people to be a part of, and recognizing that at any point they could pull their participation, you could pull your participation. But if everybody wants to stay together, doing what's necessary in order to have that happen for sustainability and longevity, it's possible. But it's going to take self-reflection on your part as someone who is the owner of that company, who is in charge of the livelihoods of, 50, 100 people, and saying, what do I continue to desire for myself? And how do I create that with what I have? Or how do I let that go and let that be all right?
I think it's a great response, Alexis, and totally agree that that's where a founder or a leader needs to start. But if they're ready to start driving change, if they say, I want this to be a workplace where everybody is able to come in and bring their best self, everybody is able to come in and do their best work, and we're working together in a way that minimizes friction and enhances opportunity and outcomes, then I think it's a public commitment. It's speaking to your colleagues and your employees and saying, I think this is the culture we should be driving towards, culture of openness and of communication and of clarity and of inclusivity, a culture where we are open to learning, where we seek out new information, where we seek to find out where we're wrong so we can improve. Make that commitment as a leader, enshrine that in the way that you plan to work with others, and then demonstrate it every single day. And it's got to be a mindset shift. It can't be performative. It's got to be real. And if you're not ready to make that change, then you're not ready. But that's the big first step.
Damn. Okay, there is one question that I ask every episode, and it's regardless of the topic of the episode, what is one thing that you each want to push back against, a social norm that you want to push back again and teach others about?
Oh, shucks.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's the awareness that professionalism is performative, not instrumental. And if you are expecting somebody to look, act, behave, socialize in a particular way as evidence of being professional or capable, I say you're doing it wrong. And so any sort of attitude that revolves around, well, this is just what it means to be a knowledge worker or an employee or to be professional in the workplace, that is not tied to the actual ability to drive outcomes, throw it away.
I love that answer. I have actually made it my life's mission to show up not dressed like the role that I have for so long. I love teaching my workshops in like sweatpants suits and stuff, because I'm like, think about what it is that I'm saying. Think about how it is that I'm moving. Does it have anything to do with what I'm wearing. No, probably not. And I think that COVID should have taught us that. Should have been a fast track to realizing that professionalism is not what we think it is. And then everybody wanted to get called back to office and forgot their COVID roots. And I don't like that. But I love that. And I so agree with that. And then I would add that you just do not have to do what everybody else is doing. You went on your own. You took the road less traveled. Why do you want to get to the same place everybody else got to? Why are you trying to take your own path just to end up where everybody else is? If you're going to be different, commit to being different. It's already your thing. You don't have to do what everybody else did. You don't have to follow the rules. All rules are made up rules, okay? We put them here because we wanted a sense of control over something. And now look at you. Your ducks are still in the pond. Not a single duck in a row, right? You're fighting so hard against your nature, against who you are. For what? Because somebody else did it their way. They did it their way. So do it your way. What works for you works for you. And the people that you're meant to be surrounded by, they will find you. But you trying to bend over backwards to be somebody else, to impress every Tom, Dick, and Harry, who, mind you, is not even going to invest in your company or give you the things that they say they're going to give you. Fuck them. You don't need them. Do things the way that you have always been feeling like you want to do. Trust yourself. Trust that inner voice. You asking everybody else what we should be doing. Oh, well, this one guy said that he did it this way. I don't care. He's not you. He's not me. Take what you want, what he says, and then chuck the rest. And I promise you, you will find the success that you so deeply desire so much faster when you stop doing things that everybody else tells you to do the same way everybody else says to do it. Trust yourself and watch your business grow.
You know, Alexis, I could not agree more, because at the end of the day, right, are we going to be on the deathbed and going to be like, okay, I remembered that I was the second X person, like the person that we wanted to be like. Mm-hmm. I was the second best. I was like this person. This was my life. And it's like, is that what we want to be remembered for? To be that a replicate of something, of somebody else, of another idea. We didn't even get to explore what our idea looked like. But damn, thank you so much, Alexis, Mark, for coming on and getting into this. And to you, my badass listener, thanks for tuning in to the Art of Positioning podcast. If you've loved this episode, please share and review. And you can check out Alexis and Mark and catch out that brand health tool from the episode description. In the meantime,
no more excuses.
Kick ass and stay badass.
No more branding band-aids.
I'm just like, oh, I have to be on a video today, so I should probably make sure my hair is doing something. And that's what we do on Wednesdays.
Those mornings at 5:30 where suddenly they're jumping up and down on top of your head. And I guess that probably happens with kids too. I don't know for sure, but slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yeah. Have you eaten anything? How much water have you had to drink? Like, what are you doing? We're all these creatures that need to be fed and watered and away from other people and with other people, depending on the time of day.
And I wonder if they do this if they're off duty as well.
The art of positioning. Let's freaking go.